Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of How Mental Health Crisis Created Government. Now, this is part one, and in part one, we'll be talking about the collective consciousness. When we start to dive into the realm of conspiracy theories, I feel like it is important to stick to the facts. I also would like to emphasize what I talk about in this series mostly has to do with historical fact. And with that being said, we cannot change history, but we can change our future for the good by learning from it. I am not a psychologist in any way. I'm not a historian. I'm not a scientist officially. And I'll have to put that in air quotes, officially. But I do have experience in mental health. I have a lived experience in mental health. And I do not claim any of my hypotheses to be true, fact, or biased in any way. My hypothesis is only based off the things that I can observe through all five senses and through what we have in recorded history. So what is a collective consciousness? Collective consciousness refers to the shared beliefs, ideas, attitudes, and knowledge that are common to a social group or society acting as a unifying force. Here are the facts. This term was coined by Emil Durkheim. While collective consciousness is widely accepted as a sociological reality, whether it exists as a physical or mystical field is subject of ongoing scientific study rather than a settled fact. Research in neuroscience has proven that humans physically sync up during shared experiences. Brain images show that communication, shared rituals, brain activity in all participants synchronizes. Heart rate and brainwave patterns also synchronize during activities. Emotions and behaviors spread through groups like a virus. Highly cohesive groups often reach a consensus where individuals suppress their own private judgment to match the group's perceived will. A phenomenon proven to affect decision making in high-stake environments. Cognitive architecture shows humans are uniquely skilled at tracking not just what they know, but what everyone else in the group knows, which is essential for large-scale cooperation. While the effects are proven facts, the ideas of a literal, invisible global mind remains theoretical. So the theory. Emil argued that a fundamental role of religion is to create and reinforce this shared mindset to ensure social cohesion. In this view, religion is not just a personal belief system, but a social glue that binds individuals into a single moral community. To me, however, I feel that collective consciousness used as evidence that supports deities that are ever powerful and that are the creation of existence in general is a trigger for rituals and other forms of worship that become the product of a mental health crisis that goes unchecked. A mental health disorder is defined as a clinically significant disturbance in a person's thinking, emotional regulation, or behavior. Religion is defined in two ways: substantively, which is beliefs in the supernatural, and functionally, which provide which is saying, how does religion provide meaning and social glue? So the sociological definition: it's a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things that unite followers into a single moral community. Then there's the substantive, and that's the belief in spiritual beings. The anthropological definition, which is a system of symbols that establishes a powerful, long-lasting mood and motivation by formulating a general order of existence. And then there's the psychological, which is feelings, acts, and experiences. Julian Jaynes argued that early humans experienced thoughts as external voices or commands from gods, similar to the auditory hallucinations seen in schizophrenia today. When this mental structure collapsed around 3,000 years ago, people began to develop self-reflective consciousness, but still sought the lost voices of gods through prayer, oracles, and organized religious structures. So if we go by that theory there, and trying my hardest to keep this about collective consciousness, plants and animals that go their whole lives without a single thought on the afterlife and why they exist still shows evidence of collective consciousness without religion. Evidence of collective consciousness is categorized as a swarm intelligence in animals in mycorrhizal networking in plants. This phenomena shows these plants and animals to work as one. They work as one single superorganism. There's examples of this in ants and bees, fish schools and bird flocks, so with ants and bees and fishes and birds, we don't see them turn to religion in order to find an answer for this collective consciousness. They don't even try to find an answer for the collective consciousness. They just understand, hey, we're thinking the same way, and if we continue to think the same way, we can help each other achieve a higher goal that we can't achieve by ourselves. So this is how I think religion turns it into a mental health crisis. A mental health crisis is any situation in which an individual's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors reach a point where they can no longer cope with reality in a safe way. If collective consciousness is the reality, but enough people think that the voices, rituals, and religious services provide no actual proof that some deity's agenda has been met, this can possibly mean that religion developed due to the feeling of a pointlessness, a hopelessness, and shame that results in the inability to cope with reality as it is. And if there's no way to tell if someone is having a mental health crisis like in prehistoric times, someone that is having a mental health crisis can force others to engage in the rituals and services that they start to make up in their minds because they or the gods told us to. So what does this mean? What I am proposing is that because the lack of understanding and research behind mental health compared to today's society, that because the normal and healthy population and their ignorance to the crisis taking place were easily tricked and gaslighted into thinking that because they didn't hear voices but the person experiencing a crisis did, that the person having a crisis is able to convince everyone that he can help achieve whatever his psychosis wants him to. So religion developed as a way for someone intelligent but sick and unhealthy to assume power so that they are able to cope with the feelings of hopelessness. So how do we fix this? And how do we prevent this from happening again? We must first look at where the sense of fear as a collective developed in humans. So stay tuned for part 2, where I dive into the evolution of the human consciousness and when the idea of no God cause a panicked psychosis where the person having the crisis is catastrophizing the fear that they may one day not exist, which makes him cope with the idea in an unhealthy solution to a problem that no longer exists. We no longer have the problem of not existing. So why are we going to keep on coming up with ideas that make us believe that we exist somehow after this, even though the collective consciousness already shows that anybody that lives after me also has the same knowledge that I have, the same skin that I have, the same thoughts that I have. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for part 2.